So picture this, you're sitting in front of a TV and you're watching a commercial instead of switching back to Judge Judy like you probably should have. Because by the end of this commercial, you just realized, what the heck was that? Who the heck was that for? And it wasn't until they showed the brand logo that you were like, oh, it's a perfume commercial. And now I know we've all been there and we've all watched commercials where there's just a plain white background and Justin Long walks in. And we know that's a dang Apple commercial. So right away, Apple has branded themselves with their visuals. And this is something that we can all do as video creators as well. Now I'm going to give you 3 tips on how to stay on brand with your videos. So the first way to stay on brand is by choosing a color palette. Now this can be something like 5 colors that you've picked that go along with a color scheme. You can do things like throw them in the back of your videos or make sure all your fonts are colored that color. But colors are a great way to kind of define your brand before you even get started. Now you can start with something like a color scheme. So that's when you pick one color and then have the other colors kind of revolve around it, and this can create your palette. If you're having trouble kind of making a palette, a good tool is Adobe Color. So it's always important while you're picking these colors to make sure you have a meaning behind these. If you look online, there's tons of different background stories to why certain colors mean certain things, and if you just do your research, you can pick colors that actually speak to their subconscious. I'll have a link to a couple of those down below as well. Now lastly, for color, a thing to think about is your LUTs, or how you're grading your footage. Now when it comes to something like this where you're doing a talking head piece, you can always use the same LUT for every single one to make sure that they all look the same. So number 2 is make sure you have a solid defined message. Now I know you probably hear this all the time, you know, you want to make sure that your message is cohesive and you're always talking about the same kind of stuff to kind of target your niche. But a few ways that you actually use your message is in things like your intro or your end screen. So something like that can show what your whole message is and what kind of style you have. So also using things like catchphrases, by saying those things all the time, you're kind of repeating your message so it gets stuck in people's head. Okay, so lastly, we're going to talk about fonts. You should really stick to one font family if you can. Just pick something with a lot of options like bold and light and regular fonts. Now there's some exceptions, like when you're doing something like a Halloween episode, you can totally use a sort of scary font that you wouldn't use regularly. But for everything that's just a normal thing that's going to be reoccurring, you should probably stick to a font family that actually works for you and doesn't make people guess what the heck they're watching. It's also kind of important to stick to something like black and white just because it's clean, and just make sure if you're putting something on a dark background, just make sure it's white. So something simple, clean, and probably sans serif are usually a safe bet because they don't give you a old-timey feeling, unless that's something you're going for. So I like to use a website called DaFont. They have tons of different fonts on there that you can just download and start using. I would be aware of what fonts you use for what projects, because things like clients, you can't use the free for personal use ones, but if they're just for your YouTube channel or for other types of videos that you just make for fun, yeah, you can pretty much use any of the fonts that say free for personal use. Okay, so to recap, tip number 1 is keep consistent color. Number 2, keep a consistent message. And 3 is to use fonts. Okay, there you have it, the 3 tips on how to stay on brand better with your videos. Also check the description because I'll have some LUTs there that you can download for free to try with your brand, and maybe they'll fit your style. Awesome, well thanks for watching and we'll catch you in the next one.